Hello, this is Stuart from Hear Me, See Me podcast, and today I've got someone who I've actually known for such a long time, but we've never really been in touch too much. But she's just speaking to us, taking me straight back to the 90s when I first met her. Today I'm talking to lovely Carolyn Newman. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you, Stuart. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. As I said, as soon as I knew I was going to be speaking to you, I just thought back of the old days, when my salon was pretty new open, and I used to go up to Worthington's and do listen to the talks and things when I first met you. But we'll go on to that anyway at some point, because I wanted to go straight in and ask you, obviously, your early life, then what led you into hairdressing, if you don't mind.
Okay, well, first of all, you mentioning the 90s sort of brings it all back, doesn't it? Absolutely brilliant. But thank you so much for having me on. And my early life, some people know this, but some people don't, is that, and you sometimes can hear it in my voice, is that I am Australian, and I actually was born and grew up in Tasmania. And I had an incredible childhood. I grew up with a brother and two sisters and my parents, and I did a lot of stage work. So I danced from the age of 6 on stage. I played musical instruments, I did theatre. So I always loved presenting myself to people, which has actually really gave me a great base for what I did in the future with hairdressing. But I came to my work experience time. I was 15 and I had to choose work experience, and I wanted to be a journalist, and we only had one newspaper where I lived, so it was very hard to get into, and my mum suggested putting that down as number 1, but putting maybe hairdressing down as number 2. She said, you're good with people, you love your hair, you're into fashion. So I just put it down, never really thought about it. And I got hairdressing as my work experience, so I sort of knew that I probably would. And I can say, honestly, that the minute I walked in the door of the salon, I knew this was where I was going to be. Yeah. I sort of knew that it was quite an exciting, and also going in, not to have my hair done, but going into work there was such a different feeling. And from there, I got as soon as I did my work experience, I loved it so much, I went to my salon down the road, down the hill where I lived, and I went and worked there every Wednesday and Saturday, and then they gave me an apprenticeship. And that was really exciting, because I didn't want to go on to college or go to university, because it wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a hairdresser. So it was really important I got an apprenticeship. So my mum and dad and I really worked hard on going to lots of interviews so that I can have offers when I left school, because I think that's a bit of a scary thing when you leave school and you go, right, I need to get a job now, and you don't know if you can get a job. For me, there wasn't an option. I had to get a job. And so I did my apprenticeship at a lovely salon called Sam's Hair Design. And then after I finished there, I moved on to a salon in the town called The Terrace, which was the sort of known society salon. And that was run by 2 fabulous guys, Robin and Michael, who often went to London, and they worked in London. They worked at Michael John.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so they'd done the London scene. So for me, growing there, by then I'd done my apprenticeship and I was a stylist. But for me, that was real inspiration. And my grandmother is Welsh, she was Welsh, and she was born in Cardiff. And I always said, because I could come over on a good visa, I'm going to London. So in 1989, I came to London. I was a bit older by then. I was 24. And the reason why I left it a little bit later was that a lot of people in Tasmania would go, right, I've done my apprenticeship, I'm 18, I'm going overseas. And then they'd be back within 3 or 4 months, because they couldn't cope with it. They weren't ready for it. So I sort of waited a little bit until I had some money under my belt, and also I went with a great friend, and I was also a bit more mature, and also mature in the hair world. I was a stylist. So, you know, I knew I had finished my apprenticeship. And I came in 1989. I've been here ever since.
And where did you first work in London?
So when I first worked in London, so again, I think for anyone moving overseas anywhere, you do think, oh, I'm qualified and, you know, I'm just going to get a job anywhere. And we know at the time in the early 90s, it was very difficult to get work as a stylist in London. In London, they want you to retrain all the time. So you have to really prove yourself. I did a lot of trials and a lot of tests. I went to the big salons, and I was going to have to go back and retrain for probably 2 or 3 years. So you have to weigh that up. You have to decide whether that's what you really want to do. Have you got the money for that? Because you won't be earning a lot. Or can you find another way? So I just sort of think you need to do your research, but you also need to respect those. If those companies say this is how it is, that's how it is.
Yeah.
But there are other salons that you can actually go to as well. So I actually ended up going out of London to Surbiton because I just couldn't find the right job for me in London at the time. And I kept, you know, looking for jobs. And I ended up going to work for Nicholas French, who's actually a very well-known hairdresser in America now. Right. And he works a lot for Matrix. If you see, he works a lot for Redken and Matrix, and does a lot of the big shows over there. And he ended up opening a salon in London, so I got to work a little bit in London.
Yeah.
I worked there for a year, and it's very funny how the path of how I got to where I am now is all down to me walking down Carnaby Street one afternoon, and that is definitely how my life changed forever. And I know it sounds dramatic.
I hear it all the time. There's sliding door moments, and then you know, if you'd have not done it that day, maybe that would have. Yeah. No,
so I was working for Nicholas French. The team were fantastic. We had such a wonderful, wonderful time. But he had a salon in Surbiton, which I worked at. Then when he opened London, I did Mondays and Fridays in London. So I started to get my taste of London, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Weirdly, I lived in London and travelled out to Surbiton. So, you know, I always knew that I wanted to come back to London. And I was walking down Carnaby Street to go to Boots in my lunch break. And I ran into an old school friend who was over here, and he was working as an accountant for one of the production companies. He was like a junior accountant for one of the production companies for Channel 4. And he worked with everyone that did, worked the Clive Anderson shows, Drop the Dead Donkey, all those really old iconic comedy shows that were on Channel 4. So he had a really amazing job. He was on the accounting team. And his girlfriend, who was Tasmanian as well, was working for Charles Worthington in Covent Garden. And we ran in and we were having a chat, and he told me he was going out with Michelle and that they were here together. And he said, oh, she's working for a great company. And he said, come and meet us, well, you know, come and have dinner with us and, you know, come out with us. And at the time, I'd only been in London a year. And my friend, I think, was just about to go back to finish her degree. So it was at the time when you sort of did hook up with anyone you knew, because I knew no one when I came over here. No. And that can be a very, very hard time, very lonely. I'd have to say the one thing about working in a hair salon is that you make friends immediately, and you've got people that will take you out. So if you say, oh, I'm not doing anything tonight, oh, well, we're going out, come with us. Yeah. You know, so you immediately create a social life for yourself because of the energy of the salon team, and people, you know, will have a quick drink after work or dinner. And anyway, so I met her, and she just told me all about the Charles Worthington company she was working for. And she said, we're looking for stylists. I think you'd be really good there. Yeah. And she had, about 3 or 4 years before me, worked at the place I'd worked in Tasmania. So we knew each other, but we didn't know each other well, but we became really good friends. And again, I then went and had an interview at the salon in Covent Garden. And for the minute I walked in, I met Charles and Alan, and I just thought they were great. And then obviously I had to do my trade test. And then I couldn't believe that they offered me the job to join them as a stylist. And they, at the time, they'd been operating for 4 years. So they were in the world of hairdressing. When you look at the other companies that were around at the time, so Soons, Trevor Sorby, John Frieda, Tony and Guy, etc., they were quite young in that world, because the others had been going for like 10 years, 10, 15 years. And so I joined as a stylist, and from day one I just knew this was a great place, and you know, they're wonderful people, and you know, the late Jane Worthington, Charles' sister, you know, they were incredible, and they always said, what you put in you get out of. So if you want to progress, we were a young company, if you want to progress with us and you work hard, you will progress with us. And it was true. And I think I met you by you came up to the salons, didn't you, or to L'Oreal?
L'Oreal, yeah. I mean, I'm reliving so many things as you're talking. I'm going all the way through. And by that time, I'd opened my own salon. So I opened my own, I'd done 10 years. So I opened my own salon in 88, but I started in 78.
Yeah, right.
As a trainee for a same story, the sort of the go-to salon of the area. I spent 5 years with those, then I went freelance for 5 years. And then I probably had the salon about 2 or 3 years. I'd had no managerial experience because I'd left and then gone freelance, and I sold my home and bought a building and opened the salon. But from day one, I had no clue how to run it. I had no business sense. I was very artistic. I had no, and what drew me with L'Oreal started doing these days where you could go up and meet people, and I found the Worthingtons one. When I went up to see that, it blew me. It just, you know, when you have them light bulb moments.
Yeah.
And as your old stylists in Australia used to come to London and bring that back to there, exactly what I had this thing to do. And people thought I was nuts, and I was a bit nuts at the time, because as I was at that age, all in, you know, like I'm all in. And I saw, and the great thing was that you had the artistic skill of Charles, but the business acumen of Alan.
Absolutely, yeah.
That is such a crucial thing in our industry, where some people have got one or the other, but to get that was the power of those. And I forget the story they said on that first day was that that Charles got the offer of doing a Vogue shoot. Yeah. And Alan stopped him doing it because at that stage they needed the money. They needed them. That's something to do for free, don't you? And they needed, you know.
He needed to be working in the salon, earning money. That was definitely the balance. But I just want to go back. When I was doing my training at Sam's Hair Design in Tasmania, my boss, Christine Davies, once a year would fly to London and do courses over there and then bring them back. And I just think, like, I was really fortunate, because at that time, I just want to make everyone aware that at that time there was no mobile phones, no internet. I used to get Hairdressers Journal International 6 months later than anyone else. And so, you know, to have that, as you say, what you did to come down, you know, to come to London, that's really, people were doing that all over the world. But that's really what, again, London was being brought back to me in a tiny little salon in Launceston, Tasmania. And I was 16 at the time. So that impression always meant, so me coming and doing these things with Charles and Alan, and working with Charles, who's, you know, is creative genius, and Alan, the business genius. I just learnt so much from both of them. And also, for me, this was London. And so I couldn't believe I was riding this. But I was very fortunate. After 8 weeks working there, they asked me if I would like to train as a deputy manager for their salons. But what they wanted was a commitment of a couple of years. And I was going back for a wedding to Australia. I'd already been over here nearly 2 years. And I remember going back home to my parents and telling them, this is what I've been offered, but they had to understand that I was going to be away for 2 years. And because I was the first child of theirs to come overseas. And my dad just said, you could be doing this in Sydney or Melbourne, but you're being asked to do this in London. You're going back. And he wasn't knowing any of that, you know. And
that's generous, isn't it? That's real generosity towards your child.
Well, my parents have been incredible. I lost my dad in 2010. But my mum is in Adelaide. She's 84. But my parents have always absolutely supported me. I mean, Mum did not want me to go. Mum did not want me to go because she knew I wouldn't come back. And I've been here longer than I've lived in Australia. Yeah. But it was incredible from them. And then my brother met an English girl and came over here. So they had two of their children over here. Luckily, they had the other two that had all the kids back there. But it was, I know, at the time for them to say that, and it was very important to have that support. But I think I ended up getting an incredible group of girlfriends who were not hairdressers, and they are my family over here to support me, and then also having a really good support network at work. And I think one of the key things, what you were saying with the business things, is that I learned to run a salon as well as be creative. So most of the time I was a manager and on the art team. So, you know, one thing about Charles Worthington, you weren't just pigeonholed in one area. You were taught lots and lots of different things. That can be good, but sometimes you then want to specialise a little bit, like you want to just be management or you want to be creative. But at the time, we were doing all bits of everything. At one point, I think I was in charge of the training and looking after the art team a bit and managing a salon. So I was doing all three different jobs. But it was exciting. It was really exciting. And I think the key thing about why I could do these jobs or why I could be pushed is, first of all, they did push me. So they set me tasks that I thought I could never achieve. And I'm very much like, give me something. If you want me to do it, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. So I wanted to prove to them that I could do it, and to myself. And secondly, they gave me education and training support. You mentioned Alan Austin Smith from the Fantastic Hairdresser. And when Alan first started, he did a business course, which I know Jane Worthington attended, but I attended all the management training. And that gave me such a confidence to then be able to manage people in salons. And, you know, I still use those management skills now. And I think that's the thing, you know, the inspiration, you know, the things that we got to do when we did education with L'Oreal, and they took me all over the world. And that's where the stage work came in, is that I wasn't afraid of getting up on stage and talking to people, because I've been doing it since I was 6. I was more concerned about what my hair work was going to look like rather than the talking. A lot of hairdressers are a bit scared of the speaking part. That for me was nothing. I didn't bother me.
And it is interesting that sometimes, you know, the stylist who can talk all day long, you know, 6 days a week. I want to put a microphone near them and they just clam up. I've seen it so many times, and it's so odd because you think, this isn't you. You're so outgoing and so flamboyant, and then all of a sudden,
I know. You know, on all my classes that I teach, I ask them when we have to do models. When they do models, I ask them all to present their model back before they leave to the class. Now, the reason why I do that is so that the students who've been busy with their model can see what has been done and may get some ideas of some colour or styling combinations or tips and tricks. But when I say, oh, you've just got to present to the class, like, oh, I don't want to do that. And you go, but you've just been talking non-stop to your client. And I went, you just have to present it, because, and I would not let anyone get out of that. I made them, even if I had to ask them the questions, and I just say, well, you answer my questions. But I myself used to find that, like you, weird, because we talk all the time. But I think going on stage with a microphone is a little bit more scary. But I think Instagram and TikTok is making people more confident with these things. So maybe this will help the next hairdressing presenters of the future.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, undoubtedly everyone's become, so sort of social media and presentable.
Yeah, and we've had to, in the last year, present on screen.
Yeah.
You know, pitch for business, talk to, you know, be in serious meeting or show models or things. So I think, you know, I think that will help more as a confidence because it's practice.
Yeah. I was going back to Worthington's. It was that time. It's not going to be the whole thing about Worthington's, but it's just it played such a big part.
Well, I was there for 25 years, Stuart. It played an enormous part of my life. So yeah, and it was known. It was started off as Worthington's, and then it went to Worthington's Hair and Beauty Company, and then it ended up now where it's Charles Worthington London.
Yeah.
So it went full circle, and that's where they are now.
I mean, because when I had, I mean, that inspiration they gave me, I came back and even the details, I was asking them, I even asked them where they got their coffee from, because they had these Rombouts coffee filters on top of the cups, you know, tray, and I went back, I wanted to know where they got the trays. I must have drove out of mad. I want to know where they got the trays, where they got the cups, where they got, and I came back and overnight, virtually overnight, I doubled the salon's prices.
Wow.
I look back, actually talking about Alan, he always uses that as a story, like it's maybe not to do it, but having that bravery to just go, no, we're not doing this anymore. I should have phased it in, but you know, I was different from that one day's education. I came back, and we're not like that now. We are now London service. So we had the trays, and we had the coffee, and we had the head massages, hygiene bags, and all these things. And that's the inspiration that people can give other people. You know, that inspiration is so special. Yeah. And to the point where one day, you imagine I had salon for 30 years. Can you imagine how many stylists left? Yeah. Sometimes it isn't the best thing when someone leaves. I had a young girl, Julie, and as soon as she said, so I'm leaving, I knew, you know, they walk in the office and you go, right, she's going. And, and I said, what are you going to do? I'm going to work for Worthington's. And I've never been so proud. And I was like, Julie, you're going to work for, that's amazing. You know, I mean, fortunately, she's been taken from us far too young. Yeah. But, bless her. But yeah, I was so pleased when she went. So pleased.
Yeah. And I think that was a big difference because at the time, so Charles Worthington, I think, opened in 1986. So at the time, the London scene was all about the haircut. And it had come from the Sassoon era where people were not really, they were still doing blow dries, but it was more about the haircut, and it was more about clients coming in and just getting the haircut and or colour technique, but not much about the service or, you know, having time. And I think the big difference was when Charles and Alan joined together was Alan used to be the general manager for two of the biggest restaurants in town, which one was called Park and Coconut Grove. Yeah. And so they were places where Rolling Stones used to go, Mick Jagger, David Bowie used to go, and he was the general manager and he ran both restaurants. Yeah. And so when he came to join up with Charles, he sort of at first said, what am I going to do? But he then did the general management role, but he also did the marketing and the PR. So while Charles was doing the hair, Alan was on the phone calling all the journalists and, you know, trying to get them to talk about Charles Worthington. And I want to point out that didn't take, you know, a couple of weeks. That took a couple of years, you know, of that relentless focus on that. But also what he brought was the service element. And so the idea was that, you know, you came for to get your hair done, but you walked into a salon with beautiful flowers, great music for the clients, not for the team. Yeah. Again, at the time in the 90s, it was all about how loud could the music be. And it was more about, you were in a club where this was more for the clients. Yeah. And secondly, it was also about, and at the time when they launched the refreshments, they did it for free, but they put the price of the refreshments in the cost of the service. Yeah. And, you know, coffee, tea, and, you know, a glass of champagne while you're having your haircut. Lots of people, that wasn't happening. And as you said, I can remember at seminars, they would get out the tray and show how it was presented with the coffee, the tea, or, you know, and, you know, a cake or chocolate or biscuit. And then, you know, and you got, you know, a packet of nuts with your, guys could have beers.
Yeah.
But it was also, I remember a client saying to me that when she first came, she said, oh, I came to this salon for the first time when they opened, and it was lovely flowers and it really good. And I thought, oh, that won't last.
Yeah.
And she said, 5 years on, the flowers are getting bigger and better every year, you know. So I think that a lot of clients thought at first that this was just an opening thing, and they still do refreshments and drinks and beautiful flowers, you know, now, and they're heading towards, you know, 40 years.
Yeah.
So, you know, that is incredible. It's those little, it's the detail.
Yeah.
But you had to still deliver fantastic haircut, the fantastic colour. But it was very much the detail that, and all of a sudden people were talking about Charles Worthington. And I think very interesting was that Charles had come from, I think it was Alan, I think it might have been L&D, or one of the companies that wasn't so well known, and then he'd gone and worked at Stage Door as their art director. Right. Stage Door is where Zoe Oman came from. Yeah. And so again, he sort of came, and all of a sudden there were these salons. And I also, a really big reminder when Charles opened Percy Street, which was one of the big salons of first time. It's gorgeous, Percy Street, still is today. I remember that we all thought, God, the reception area is huge. Yeah. Why don't we put more stations in there? You know, but he said, when clients walk into a salon, often reception areas are tiny.
Yeah.
And they all sit and all hunched up. And while they're waiting for their stylist, it's all really busy and very tiny, small, that they start to get stressed and they start to get anxious.
Yeah.
And he said, I want it to be like a hotel or an airport lounge, like a business class lounge, or an airport, a hotel lounge, where you sit and you relax and it's big. And do you know what? It was such a clever idea, and it so worked. Yeah. Because your clients could sit down. We'd still end up with like 3 people on the sofa, but there was a big table where they could put their drinks, they could sit, and already they were relaxing. So by the time you got them in the chair, they were all ready to have a really great service. They weren't stressed, they weren't anxious. And especially people that were nervous about having their hair done.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really, really clever. So he deliberately did that for the clients, as opposed to putting 2 more sections in to make more money. But he made more money because of that client experience. And
it was being client driven.
Yeah.
You know, we go back to the late 80s. It was hairdresser driven, wasn't it?
Yes, that's exactly what it was. Yeah.
I think he was one of the first ones that became client driven.
Yes, yeah, and everything I believed in was always in. And again, I always say, when I became colour director, everything I did, whether it was for a shoot, whether it was for a hair show, every technique I created, they said, you've now got to create that technique and modify it so that we can sell it on the shop floor and make money from it. Yeah. So it was all linked. So we didn't go out and we did do some crazy stuff on our big shows, but like our signature technique all had to be used in the salon, and we sold them as services. Yeah. Even some of we did tie-dyeing in the salon on clients.
Yeah.
And we did it soft, and that sort of became the new dip dye freehand sort of colouring stage back in the mid-90s. So again, they always have been client-centric. And I think what's really interesting, I think then everyone sort of started to catch up.
Yeah.
And I think what's really interesting with what's happened to us as hairdressers in the last 2 years is that the drinks and things are important, but it's not the beauty of them anymore. It's the hygiene and the health of them. So, you know, instead of having a beautiful cafetiere, you have coffee in a paper coffee cup, but you have it with a lid on it so the client can take it away. Yeah. You can give them biscuits or something, but they're in a sealed container, and if they don't use it, they take it away, because otherwise you can't reuse it.
No,
so all that all that sort of, again, good salons were looking at trying to find the best sort of, disposable gowns, the best towels, to try and give that sort of quality. So it sort of changed a little bit, which in a way has exposed people a little bit more, I think, but in a good way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
in a really good way.
I was gonna say about, about the effect the pandemic's had on the industry, and about how has it affected you, personally.
I think with me personally, because I'm now freelance, and I left Charles Worthington in 2016, mainly I wanted to have a slightly more balanced life, because my mum's getting older in Australia, so I want to go back over there a bit more. I've already gone over there once and done some teaching over there, which has been great. So I can sort of do a bit of work over there while I go and see my family. And also I wanted to start doing some education and just looking at some slightly different things. But I also was doing hair. So I was working for my friend Mark Trinder and Sophie Trinder, who are ex-Charles Worthington people, and they've got a beautiful salon up in St Albans.
Right.
And I actually went to work there again by accident, because he just moved salons, and one of his stylists broke her ankle, and he had no one that could take over, so he said, could I come in and help out? And I was supposed to be there for 8 weeks, and I stayed there for 2 years. I did 2 days a week there, and then I did 1 day a week at Hunter Collective, which, is a co-working space for independent freelance hairdressers, which is the new movement, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit. But what I found with so that's where I was at. So I was doing hair one or 2 days a week, and then I was doing my education before COVID hit. And I'd always decided to, I've been in the industry 40 years, so I decided I wasn't going to work like a crazy woman anymore. So I was working 3 or 4 days a week, and that's what I wanted to do. So so I could focus on other things, like we're working on a house at the moment and things like that. Yeah. And when COVID hit, I think first of all, it was incredibly scary. I think it's also very different when your family lives on the other side of the world. But luckily, I had just been in Australia at the end of 2019. And that was a surprise visit. I'd gone over there as a surprise because someone had asked me to go and do some work out there. So I went out and worked in Perth for a week, and then I ended up spending a month at home with my family. Which was incredible, because no one knew. But I came back at the beginning, middle of November, December, and people were already talking about things going on in China, but no one was saying what it was, or, it was on the plane, someone said, have you heard of, there's a problem in China with a disease like, they had before. And I think a lot of people thought it was going to be the swine flu, and thought, it's going to be the swine flu, it's going to be contained, and that is it. Yeah. And as we know, it was very different. But I think the first thing was a little bit scary. And, luckily, I don't know what we would have done without, laptops and, the internet, and to be able to, do things like this, but also communicate. I could get straight on and FaceTime my family and go, we're fine, are you fine? And I'm really lucky. My family, we've always been really grounded. So if you hear something really bad's happened in Australia, or they hear a bomb's gone off in London, my mum and dad used to have a map, and they go, okay, so Carolyn works there and the bomb's gone off over there. They were really, really, really practical about it, which was great for me, because we didn't go through that hysterical emotions, like, get on a plane and come home now, you're not living over there. I remember my mum telling me I was not allowed to go on the tube at night when I first came to London. And I rang my mum up and said, there's more people on the tube at night than there is out on the street. Because people were all going home. But, you had to, obviously communicate with them. But I think the whole thing about the pandemic is we've all had to communicate more. So I think for me personally, I'm going to say what did for me personally, but then the industry is, I think for me personally, one of the things that, as my husband's self-employed, so he taught me as soon as I went self-employed how to manage my money. And because I've been employed for 30-something years, you know, this was scary for me. And also we sat down and said, okay, financially, and we didn't know if we were going to get any help. We didn't know we didn't get any help with our mortgage and stuff. And we just sat down and we went, actually, we can be okay for the next 6 months. If we, you know, we'll have to be careful, but we could survive. And that was because when you're self-employed, you definitely, and I think this is where some salons were caught, because you do have to put money, whether you're a salon owner, whether you're a freelancer, whether you're a young stylist, a young apprentice, you should be putting a little bit of money away each month as savings. And yes, when times are great, that can be your holiday money and your house money, etc. But when times are bad, that's your net, that's your safety net. And I think so. We immediately relaxed, but of course, I'm very fortunate because I don't just do hair.
Yeah.
So I do management, I do coaching, I do education, and I also can do consultations online. So as soon as we went into lockdown, I got really quite busy.
Of course.
And so that for me was actually quite good because it was a distraction. So it meant that often I'd be called up and saying, you're doing a whole day of consultations tomorrow. And it was about talking to people about what they could use if they couldn't, they couldn't get to the hairdressers. How could they wear their hair? What would I recommend that they use? And it was by product companies. And it was great because I often would, I had to get up and have a full routine of a day. But also it was about reaching out to other hairdressers. I think I contacted regularly people that I knew were either on their own or, worked for big companies, but maybe lived alone, my industry friends, just to make sure they were okay. And a lot of us would speak weekly, just to say hello. Because as you know, hairdressers, we so are people that love being around people.
I know.
And I think all the education, one of the things I didn't do in the first lockdown, because everyone was doing it, was get out of doll's head, and just everyone was doing it. And so I went down the other way and did more. I did a lot of, I created a thing called Carolyn's Colour Business Chats. And I was asked to put something up on charity for the hairdressers charity that they could auction. And so I said, someone can have, 2 hours with me. And all of a sudden I had 3 people bidding for me that wanted it. So I actually gave it all to 3 of them if they donated to the charity.
Yeah.
And that was a real turning point for me, and actually now, because Carolyn's Colour Business Chats is for people that either work on their own or people who are young and have opened their own salon, a bit like yourself. When you opened your salon and have no management training, and you can talk to your family, but actually you can talk to me and say, I've got an issue with my team, or I want to put my prices up, or we want to introduce different colour services, or we've got problems with some colour complaints. And I'm the person you talk to. And because also what I discovered was I've got a really good address book. So people saying to me, I'd like to get into a session, or I'd like to talk to someone about, doing a shoot. Who do I talk to? Where do I start? What hair shows should I go to when we come out of this? And I also discovered that a lot of people are, not alone because they're living on their own. They're alone in business. And we all know being a boss and a manager, it can be lonely.
Yeah.
And that's done really well. And I'm actually doing my business chats at the moment. And I'm not just calling them colour now because they're a bit educational. I'm working with educators. And some of them are now, we're educating online, we're educating in England, and now I've been asked to educate abroad via Zoom. And I'm helping them formulate that and take it to the next level. And I'm also working with people who have been educators and now want to work more, want to talk to companies. And so it's all about how do they do that, who's right for them, what should they be doing, what do they need to get into place first. Because a lot of people with the internet have gone out there and gone, right, I can do a doll set, I'm going to teach. That is great, but that doesn't make you an educator. You know, I probably was educating in the UK for 3 or 4 years before I did my first international. And then it was still a massive learning curve. And I was taken by Charles. And eventually I started doing my own, where I took people. But it's like doing your apprenticeship all over again.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it's great. But that's where I now I realise that all the knowledge I have, all the wealth of it, but also I'm a really good listener. So I'll listen and think, oh, I've got an idea about what they could do. And I just bounce off ideas with them. And that's what you need sometimes. You need someone to be able to bounce off ideas with. And if you haven't got someone in there, that's what I've been doing. So it's going really, really well.
Yeah.
And I think then when I came out of COVID, I came out and just said, I realised that there was going to be no live education last year, because we started in July, then we went back into lockdown twice more, is I just went to Hunt to Collect and said, I'll do a full day once a week and do every second Saturday. And I went to Mark and said, I'll do 2 days a week for you. Because first of all, I wanted to fill all my clients in, but also with Mark's salon in St Albans, he had such a backlog that I wanted to be able to help him keep his salon and keep it going. And that's why I worked while I did, because again, it was more, now, you know, he helped and protected me while I was off. I'm going to help to protect him and his business. And I think, and that's one thing I did say to all the team, is that, you know, they were furloughed, they were protected. I said, it's now our turn to look after Mark and Sophie. And I really hope a lot of salon teams did that. And I'm sure they did. And I know they did, because at the end of the day, it's got to work both ways.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, and that was great. But I've just got to a point now where I'm sort of changing that again. I can talk about that in the end. But for me, with COVID, I think, and then it was really weird. Back in December, I worked I did extra days and worked like crazy, and then we were off again. Yeah. And that's when I set up an online business with Hairdotcom, and that was very busy. But I think when I went back in April, I was much clearer. I was saying this to someone the other day. I think when we went back in July, we were all panicking. Yeah. I think we all couldn't cope with all of the stuff with PPE we had to wear. We all were finding clients with massive regrowth. Where when I went back in April after 3 months off, I was really clear, and I knew what I was going to have to wear. And I tell you what I did do. For 2 weeks before I went back to work, I wore a mask at home during the day, because I knew I was going to get on the floor and wear a mask for 8 hours again.
That's so clever.
So used to, like, you know, and I just knew that would make me anxious. I also,
the only person I know who's done that, and I believe me, I speak to hundreds and hundreds of hairdressers on a daily basis, and not one of them has ever said that. And that's brilliant. It's a brilliant idea.
I also promised myself that after every client, regardless if I was running late or not, I went out the back and had a drink of water. Yeah. Because I found that I was getting lots of headaches. And it wasn't because of all the stuff, it was because of the mask. Yeah. I wasn't taking it off and drinking. And after my lunch, I changed my mask. But I made that. And honestly, the difference that did for me, didn't have any headaches in April. And I also was very clear when all the clients, so all my clients were booked in for either a full head of colour, so full head permanent colour, or full head highlights, no half heads, no roots. And I might only do the roots, but I needed that extra time because I was using extra colour and things. Yeah. And that's how I did it. And I just made it really clear and said, this is what's happening this time. And it was absolutely fine. And also, I found that I did not, I found I always ran 5-10 minutes because you had to re-talk to the client, but I actually found that I wasn't as stressed or, like as I was before. So you
put that time in.
Yeah. But I do believe being on the floor Because when my last 3 years at Charles Worthington, I didn't do lots of clients because I was operations director. So for 2 years, 2 full years, I ran the company. So I looked after over 120 people and 2 big salons and a smaller salon in the city. But so going back into the salon, I do feel that it's different, and I don't know if you find that when you see salons and things, that it's different, and it, you know, with clients, but also all the long hair now.
Yeah.
Where when we were doing work in the 90s, it was haircuts, wasn't it? Like we were colouring haircuts like this, or bobs, or the longest was sort of here, wasn't it?
Yeah. And it's affected so many different things. People's priorities have changed and their tastes, and colour's really interesting, I think, because so many people have gone natural. Like you never would have thought.
No.
And you can't argue with it, because human beings are habitual. We're very habit-forming creatures.
Yeah.
And it takes about 3 months to completely change your habit. And that's what happened with buying online, with having your roots done, and all these things. We have to be prepared for a complete, like, 180 on a lot of things.
And I think also what I would say, I think people, especially over, you know, the COVID thing, I mean, for the first time, I understand hairdressers getting very scared and like panicking their clients were going to start buying home colour and things. Yeah. Can I just say, there is a home colour market, but most of the people buy home colour don't visit salons. And then it's a salon, the salon hairdress client will always be the salon client. And there was this panic. And what I found interesting was that it affected everyone. So actually, moaning and complaining about it wasn't going to make any difference because everyone was affected. And I found it quite interesting, you know, when you see, you know, the big salon owners of the, you know, the celebrity hairdressers that we've always looked at and heard about, and they're in lockdown, you know, and they can't do something they've been doing for 20, 30 years, right? I kept thinking, I wonder how they're expecting them, because, you know, this was all they know, that this was, you know, it's everyone's passion and life, but it affected everyone equally. So there wasn't, you know, there wasn't any high grade. So actually, at the end of the day, you know, it's still around. We have to be very careful. We have to protect ourselves and our clients. And I think it's very interesting at the moment, because even though the rules have changed, I don't think a lot of the rules have changed in hair salons at the moment.
No.
I think people are still wearing masks. I think maybe instead of doing 2 meters or 1 meter, people are now putting, you know, more seats in action as well. But everyone's still wearing masks. Everyone's still asking clients to wear masks. Everyone's using hand sanitizer still, and the cleaning. And I mean, I used to say to clients, we used to clean all the time. I said, I would never come to you, a new client, and touch your hair if I hadn't washed my hands. I said, we always did that, you know. So I said, you know, and it's funny, cleaning sections, I think that's just a habit which is good, that's going to happen all the time. Yeah,
it's a lot of things we've adapted with doing haircuts for homeless. There's things that we're going to keep, many things that we're going to keep. You know, it's brought people's the hygiene to people's attention.
It's incredible what you do with the haircuts for the homeless, and I suppose you had to really bring in all that sort of safety procedure, but you were on the road, weren't you? That must have been a challenge.
No, it was really tough. That first, as you said, going back to July of last year, that bit was very, very tough, because as well, we built up haircuts for homeless as doing, because going back to all these influences, you know, like Charles Allen Smith, they was influencing me going around homeless centres, you know, because I wanted it to be
brilliant.
I wanted to be. The biggest thing about us is respect. So I wanted that to be as much as a salon experience as possible. So we built it, and it couldn't be sustainable in this climate, because we didn't wear gloves. We didn't have aprons. We didn't have, you know, because we wanted to treat people like human beings.
Yeah.
You know, and people say, oh, do I have to wear gloves? And I used to really make a thing of it, but then obviously we couldn't. We literally couldn't after that.
Yeah.
But then, you know, you adapt.
Yeah.
I've got gloves and a mask and a visor and an apron, but I can still do a head massage.
Yes.
I can still show some love and respect.
Yeah.
So you know, it will, you can get through it. You can get past any of these things.
Yeah. And I think, I think what's really interesting at the moment is, I think we're coming into event season, and that's about to happen for the hair industry. And, you know, less of being on, I think Wella just announced they're doing their live event, Creative Head Art, there'll be the British Hair Business Awards and British Hair Awards. So more and more they're live. That would be very interesting, because again, that would be the first time people have been together. And I do know some people that are still incredibly nervous about going into groups, but as long as, you know, you test yourself, or you've been vaccinated and you test yourself, etc. Just to, you know, make sure you still do hand sanitizers and things. But I think we have to now start moving a bit forward. I think it's still very much about the salons. I think it's very interesting. I think online education is happening a little bit. But I also think live education is happening a little bit as well. But I understand we've gone through a funny few months, haven't we, where salons have been suffering again because people, either clients are cancelling because they had to self-isolate, or the team member, and I think has had to self-isolate. So I've known people that, you know, their busiest team member has been off for a week again. So I think we're still playing a bit of catch up, and I think we will play a bit of catch up until we get to the end of 2021. And I really hope we can do it without having to have any more stops. And then I think, and it's incredibly sad that we've lost salons. It's incredibly sad that has happened. But I really do hope that those salons, you know, the hairdressers have gone on to other salons and have gone on to other jobs, because their clients still would have wanted their hair being done. So, and we've just, the wonderful thing about the hair community is how supportive it's been in this. It's been incredible. And, you know, I think, I remember in the first lockdown, putting on my Instagram at night, and I could have watched something like 12 lives going on. I think I wanted to watch them all. And in the end, I just thought, no, I'll turn that off.
It was a bit live overload, wasn't it?
I know, but it was also, it was great. And as I said, it was, you know, I reached out to people, you know, and we just, you know, often we just speak once on the phone just to say, you know, how are you? Are you okay? And that's really, really important.
It was fantastic for me for doing the podcast, because I'd spent many a day schlepping all the way across London or something with my bag of recording equipment and all that. And then all of that, first it went to tape a call where it was audio only. And then once I got the Zoom thing going, you know, I'm not going back to anything now, you know.
No.
As soon as we've finished, these will come down and I can go and carry on doing my work, you know. And it's, it's crazy. Like it's so many good things have come out of it.
Yeah, well, it was really interesting. The last lockdown we had from January to April, my husband was working. He works in the film industry. And so I've been able to, so this is my dining area, and I've got two massive lights here, and, you know, it's just my little studio. I've got my flowers. There was a fruit bowl behind there before, and I have a little set that I do my Lego.
Very nice.
But yeah, so I just use it from here, and, you know, and I did a couple of teaching in October, and they went out to people in Australia and Ireland, America, which was great. And that's, you know, that's what's exciting. And I think at the moment, travel is still very up and down, and, you know, I probably won't get to Australia till next year. But I think we've just all got to, you know, just enjoy being together again and being with people, but also in the salon, sort of, you know, supporting each other, whether you're supporting your boss or the boss is supporting you. I think we've all got to support each other a bit more.
I think that's a really powerful message that we all have to take on board, you know.
And I think now we've got to hopefully put it behind us and move forward. But I think I know in one of your questions you said to me, what do I think the future of the industry? I think the industry is about to change again. And I think it's mainly because, and it's already happening, is that the working life pattern of when we used to always have to work on a Saturday, always work late night, you know, I think people being off has realised, you know, hairdressers having Saturdays off must have been an absolute delight for some of them who'd always worked Saturday. But I think I think flexibility is a word that's going to happen, because we're seeing that happen in the industry because of the independent hairdresser, that now there's these these co-working spaces are great salons. These people are constantly training themselves. I think initially salon owners used to think, well, if you go independent, you don't do training, you don't do this, but these people do, and they are running their own businesses and they're running them well, but they are still a community. So, and they attend training sessions, and they're looking after their clients at the level they've always have. And I think one of the reasons they did it was they wanted flexibility. They want to work when they want to work. Yeah. And I think we will see salons. We have already seen salons doing that. I know on Facebook someone said how he's now completely changed his working week. And he actually started off going back to what we said. He went off and talked to the clients and said, would you come in here on a Thursday, or would you come in on a Saturday? Thursday. Would you come? Because I do stuff at the weekend. And by the time he got around all his clients, he realised that no one wanted to come in on a Saturday. Yeah. So why did he have all his team in? Where if he had more in during the week, he'd make more money.
Yeah.
And he flipped it around and said, well, what if we did this and that? And he involved the team and the clients, and now he's got a balanced rota that his team are happy, so they come in and work hard, work well, because they're feeling they've got the balance. And then the clients are there when they want, when the salon's open. So I think before, where we went to 7 days a week, I think that's changing now.
Good.
I think now people are valuing weekends
I think it was Norway that they brought out a 4-day week.
Yes.
They got 5 days money.
Yeah.
And companies made more money.
Yeah, they do.
If it's done right, it's possible.
Yeah. I'd much rather do 3 long days or 4 long days.
Me too, yeah.
And then have 3 days off. It just makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that's going to change. And then one of the other things that I think we need to look at for future hairdressing is I feel sometimes with some of it, with the pandemic, it did make people a bit nasty, and it did make people a bit, oh, you do this and you do that. And, again, it's a bit like, when there was a salon that was opened by a big brand, that's not a salon, I think, that's what I'm talking about. And everyone went crazy. It's a salon. Yeah. It's a salon, and at the end of the day, if you're not selling your products online now, clients are not buying from everyone in the shop. They buy online. But that was a good thing that some salons did in lockdown, was open their own online retail. And you can do that so easily now. You can have your online store in Instagram, and people can come and pick it up, or you can get it delivered. But I think we have to understand that, there's always going to be someone that's going to open something. And actually, that's their problem. Focus on what you're doing and believe in what you're doing is right and good. But I also believe that we need to look at working more with colleges to make sure that our education is working well. And salons need to respect and understand what's happening with independence. And with the 3 areas, if a salon is quiet on a Monday, they could hire out their chair to an independent hairdresser who has a full day of clients to work for them. This independent is not going to change. They're opening up all over. But I also think, and it's something I've always said, is that I feel that we often say, college trained people need to do more. Why aren't we trying to work closer with the colleges? And it made me think when I did my training, and I think this is what made me realise it when you asked me to tell you about my beginning life of my hair journey, was that in Australia, you do a 4-year apprenticeship, and that's it. So it's 4 years, and you can't negotiate that. And you do year 1, and then you have an exam at the end, and then you move up to year 2. And when you move, and so you go to college 1 day a week, and that was paid by your salon. You got paid for going to college, and then you work the rest of the time in the salon. So I was lucky. I also got some in-salon training, but the minimum was that I went to college. But at the end of each year, I had to do an exam. And when I passed, I moved to year 2 and I got a pay rise. So I knew that if I did well at college, in part, I would move up. By year 2, end of year 2, year 3, I was about to go on the floor as well. So your salon can organise that. But you did 3 years. So it's actually a 4-year apprenticeship, but it was 3 years going to college. So 3 years training. And every time you passed and moved up a level, you got a pay rise. And then at the end of year 3, you then passed and you were a fully qualified hairdresser. But you'd started to do a bit of work in the salon, like some colours and things. But for the year 4, you were a 4th-year apprentice, like a graduate stylist, but you worked in the salon for that year to pay back the salon for your training.
Yeah.
So they paid, so I got paid 5 days a week, but I only worked in the salon 4 days a week, but I went to college. But then for that year, I worked. Now, when you say pay back, it was paying back because I was working on the floor earning money for them. I didn't have to pay them back anything. I just had to work doing clients.
Yeah.
And I still got a good pay, but it meant then that they had, that was what they got for paying that 1 day a week.
Yeah.
And then once you were released from your contract, you could stay with that salon, or if you then wanted to move on, you could. But for me, I just kept thinking, that was such a good structure because, and I don't know if they still do it over there now, but it was such a good structure because every year I knew I'd get a pay rise. So every year I moved up. And I think, the pay rise was set by your boss, I think. It was also government-led.
Yeah.
But I just sort of thought, it's that sort of moving up. And it worked for both people. It worked for the apprentice and it worked for the salon. But we have to then make sure what the training I was getting in college was good.
This is the thing.
And I think, I'm not sitting here saying I don't think it is good. I think some colleges are fantastic. I think some salons are fantastic. I think it's really making sure we get that standard. But I think, again, instead of just, moaning about, we need to be all working together. Because I think, do believe we're going through a slight change. And I think flexibility will be key.
Definitely, and I think that's crucial to work alongside colleges, and because there is too much blame put on colleges.
Yeah, them and us. It's a them and us society, which I've never approved of. I've never really agreed.
I work with Jet Training in Basildon in Essex. They're fantastic. To me, they're right up there as being how a college works. Yeah. And you go, I mean, they filmed Hair Wars in there and the show. And
it's the same we worked with Easy Hair at Charles Worthington. So Easy Hair came and delivered the theory and we did the practical. And they're fantastic. Yeah. And they're an Essex-based company.
Right. Well, that's the thing. And you go in, Jet, say, but it looks like a real funky salon in there. And, salon owners must work alongside colleges and form a real strong partnership. Not just send them off once a week and then complain that they're not getting. Get involved. Say what speak to colleges. Say what you want. What you want your trainees to learn and stuff like that. Yeah.
And also when your student comes back, what did you do at college? What did you learn? Well, show me photos. There's no excuse for not showing photos of everything they do. No. Because that is a way of making sure that they're moving on. And I know a lot of people do that, but I think we all want to move that standard up. That's got to be the next thing. And I think also too, a huge shout out to all the apprentices and all the assistants, because they're the ones that have missed out on practical training for the last year and a half. And I think without them, they're incredible, and they're the future.
Yeah,
so,
crucial.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is a crucial part of the growth and survival of our industry, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, wow, I'm worn out.
I'm sorry if I warned you out.
Well, yeah, because it's like you just brought back so many memories. I could have spoke for a couple of hours. I think it was like. So many good stuff. So much. I
know. I didn't even get to tell you any funny stories of all the hair shows I've done.
No. We'll do that in part 2.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I just really, I'm so glad I've got to speak to you. You know,
Oh,
we've had fleeting conversations. We recently
yeah.
did something at Colour World and all that, but
I know we keep crossing paths, you and I, don't we? Which is lovely,
yeah,
because you know I remember the first time I ran into you, and I hadn't seen you for a long time. We were at an event for Evo Hair, I think.
oh, Evo,
Yeah, and in a warehouse, weren't we?
yeah.
And I always, you know, I'm always aware of what you're doing, and you know, with a haircut park for homeless. And if you do your education back again, I will definitely help out for sure.
We're definitely working. You know, I'm speaking to Jet, and we're definitely going to get that going again.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah.
Well, Carolyn Newman, it's been a pleasure, and I wish you all the best for the future. Thanks for coming on, and I'm going to put all the links on to Carolyn's, all her educational stuff and everything else. That'll all go on this as well. But yeah, much love. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stuart. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you.